Production funding for Inauguration 84 has been made possible in part by the Friends of LPB. Live from the state capitol in Baton Rouge, Louisiana Public Broadcasting presents Inauguration 84, live coverage of the inauguration of Governor Edwin W. Edwards. And now your host for Inauguration 84, Beth, Courtney, and Ken Johnson.
Good morning. It's March 12, 1984, and you've just heard the end of the National Anthem for Inauguration Day for Governor-elect Edwin Edwards. I'm Beth Courtney.
And I'm Ken Johnson. Today we will be witnessing history as Edwin Edwards, the first man elected to serve 3 full terms as governor of Louisiana, is inaugurated. We will be with you throughout the morning to bring you continuous coverage of this historic event. And Beth, I don't even think the dark overcast skies are going to rain on Edwin Edwards Parade today.
Well, they've rained earlier in the day, but we're hoping for good weather for the rest of the day. And today is also the day that other statewide elected officials will be sworn into office. It will take place in the inaugural platform behind us about 11:30. As we see, we're going to have a change in plans just as we go on the air because the rains have started again, and the crowd is going to move into the Senate chambers. You certainly can have a nice shot of the back of everyone going in with their umbrellas, and we've all morning long been trying to decide whether we will be inside or outside. We have Robin Eckings down on the ground. Perhaps she can give us a new perspective. We're going to go now to Robin, who has been in the House chambers earlier, and some activity has taken place in there already this morning. Robin, what's happening inside the Capitol?
It certainly has been an interesting morning, getting rather wet on the outside. As expected in the House, they swore in the House members this morning, and they elected their new leadership. As expected, Representative John Alario of Westwego was elected Speaker. Former Speaker John Hankel did put his name in, but he was defeated. They have not selected a pro tem to this point. On the Senate side, Senate President Sammy Nunes re-elected by a unanimous vote, and apparently they're still fighting it out over there for pro tem. But everybody's been sworn in. They're getting the leadership in place. It's getting mighty wet out here, but things and business is going on as usual here at the state capitol, the best it can.
Well, Robin, it's certainly nice to see you down there. We are up here in a bit of a dry spot temporarily. You know, today is a special day. It's a day that it goes on live no matter what is occurring. The theme for this inauguration is tie a yellow ribbon, and there was a yellow ribbon around the Capitol, but as you can see, nothing much has survived today because the yellow ribbon has come down from the state capitol, and it was symbolic of a homecoming of sorts. In his inaugural address in 1972, Edwin Edwards suggested that people should come home to Louisiana because it was going to be a new place and a new day. And today is a homecoming of sorts, if a bit of a wet one, Ken.
That's right, Beth. You know, earlier today we did have the parade. It rained quite a while early this morning. It cleared up about 9 o'clock in time for the parade. They had the parade. It looked like things were going to make it outside. At first they had switched the activities to inside the chambers. Then they decided to come back in, and as you see now, it's beginning to rain again, and people are scurrying up the steps looking for someplace to go.
Well, we assure you that we will go inside, and we will have the inauguration of Governor Edwards for you. But you know, earlier today, there was a mass. It began before the heavy downpour, and reporter Carol Leslie was there. This was a memorial mass held in memoriam for Governor Edwards' brother Nolan, who was murdered very tragically during the election for this last governor's race, and the mass was dedicated to him. And Carol Leslie has a report, and I think we have a tape on it. We're going to try to go to that for you. And today, a day full of many surprises.
well-wishers of all faiths, including many other elected state and city officials. The multi-denominational congregation is ready when Edwards and his wife Elaine, along with other members from his extended family, arrive at 8. There is a slight pause before everyone in his place. The procession moves down the church aisle. Still only the governor-elect at this point, Edwards warms to his first event on today's busy agenda. Clearly, this is his day. But even though the Catholic Mass is to bless Edwards' new term in office, it is dedicated in special memory of his brother, Nolan Edwards Sr., and Jean Jones, his longtime friend and bodyguard. Both men met their ill-fated, untimely deaths last year, Nolan murdered by an assassin's bullet, and Jean the victim of a failing heart. The church began preparing for this day months ago. Even the young flag bearers leading this procession have special significance. They are grandchildren, Doug and Scott Henskins, children of Edwards' daughter Anna, a key member of his staff. Church dignitaries follow, with Archbishop Philip Hannan of New Orleans in their lead. Church protocol dictates that the Mass be celebrated by the state's highest churchman. Although the Archbishop is assisted by a number of concelebrants from Baton Rouge and other cities, the message from the pulpit is reserved from him, and he speaks of democracy, what is good for the people of any state.
In this day of very sharp contrast between the democracies and those who really practice democracy, and those who do not believe in God and therefore reject all human rights, we must vindicate our system of freedom under God and the brotherhood of all men.
Following the sermon, the offertory begins. The widow, Mrs. Nolan Edwards Sr., and her young son, Nolan Jr., carry the gifts of bread and wine to the altar. The moment is filled with memories and emotions for the governor-elect and his family. Before the communion rite, a simple exchange of peace is offered by all, and on this special occasion, Archbishop Hannan and other priests express their good wishes too. In fact, dignitaries from all over are here to help celebrate this day, including the former governor of California, Jerry Brown, and vice presidential aspirant, Congresswoman Lindy Boggs. The St. Joseph's Cathedral Choir lends 40 voices in perfect blend to mark the occasion with hymns familiar to all faiths. And the Baton Rouge Symphony String Octet adds a certain elegant distinction throughout, particularly when it premieres conductor Dinos Constantinides' newest composition written in tribute to Edwards and entitled Inaugural Images. An hour after it begins, the Mass is finished, and the day's events are off to a meditative start. A church service is not a mandatory part of any government's inaugural day activities, but in Louisiana it's become something of a tradition. Besides, a governor's third term in office needs all the help it can get, and Edwin Edwards isn't the type of man to start a new game leaving any of the bases uncovered.
Well, welcome back to a very wet inaugural day. Ken Johnson, you and I may be the only people left out here.
At this point, I think you're right, Beth. Fortunately, we have a canopy above us, but I think even with the rain, it's not going to dampen the enthusiasm of Edwin Edwards supporters. You know, when he was elected, he received over 1 million votes statewide, 62% of the vote, and certainly this is Edwin Edwards' day.
It certainly is. You know, in looking back and doing some research for today, we found that it was generally a pretty day on inaugural day, but in 1928, when Governor Huey Long was sworn in, there was a torrential downpour during their celebration. They had a dance over in the grounds of the old state capitol, and they brought in a tent from Chicago, and water came under the tent, and it forced everyone to rush out. Now, you know, it did downpour in 1976, which was Edwards' second time to be sworn in. Of course, that was a low-key celebration, unlike the one in 1972, his very first time in office, which was marvelous couchon de lait on the grounds of LSU. But in 76, because it was his second term and because it was a torrential downpour, he had a very low-key ceremony inside the LSU Assembly Center. You know, today is a day of tradition. It's a day when we inaugurate all the statewide elected officials, and we saw them come in earlier.
Yes, we certainly did. One by one they came in. We had Lieutenant Governor Bobby Freeman. We had Sherman Bernard, the insurance commissioner. We had Bob Odom, the commissioner of agriculture. We had William Gus, the attorney general, and Mary Evelyn Parker, and right on down the line. Of course, they're inside right now getting ready to be sworn in.
We are going to go inside in a few moments, but you know, today is not only the beginning of a new administration for Edwin Edwards, his third term in office, but it's also the closing out of an historic administration just passed. Governor Dave Treen was the first Republican governor to serve in more than 100 years.
And I can remember being here 4 years ago when he was sworn in, Beth. There were throngs of people here then, too, and there was a wave of optimism that a new era was ushering in. But when we look back 4 years, over the 4 years, I think people wanted what they had 4 years before.
They did, but Dave Treen certainly has a lot to look back on with pride. He addressed some issues in education, some including the environmental issues that have been tough to tackle. And so we have a bit of a retrospect, a look at Dave Treen on tape. Robin Eckings did an interview with him in the final days in office, and if we can, we'd like to go to that tape and see what it's like for the current governor right now.
I have just talked to Edwin Edwards by telephone and told him that on the basis of the returns that we now have, it appears that he is the victor. And assuming that that is so and holds true as the returns are completed, I extended to him my sincere congratulations on his apparent victory.
October 22nd, 1983. The polls in Louisiana's primary elections have been closed for several hours. In New Orleans, Democrat and former Governor Edwin Edwards is already celebrating his return to the state's highest office. In Baton Rouge, Republican Governor Dave Treen concedes defeat, having managed to draw support from only 36% of the state's voters. Nearly 4 years earlier, it had been former U.S. Congressman Dave Treen who was riding high, taking the oath to become Louisiana's first Republican governor in over 100 years. But critics claim Dave Treen did not have the ability to carry his political sense from the campaign trail into the governor's office. They said he spent too much time in his office and not among the people who'd put him there. And they said he couldn't make decisions fast enough to keep state government running smoothly. Throughout his campaign for a second term, Governor Treen lagged behind opponent Edwin Edwards in the polls. From his second-place position, Treen spent much of his time accusing the former governor of lying or distorting facts to get the vote.
I think that with maybe a different type of campaign and not focusing in on what we consider to be my opponent's shortcomings, more, say, the positive, that we would have come closer. But I can't say to you, in all honesty, Robin, that I think that would have made the difference, that would have won.
Governor Treen will return to his private law practice and says he has no plans to run again for public office. Leaving office will give him more time for golf, his favorite sport, but the governor readily admits he would have liked a second term. Is there one major difference that you think Dave Treen has made that you are particularly proud of?
I think that we have created a new standard for the performance of the governor of Louisiana. I think we've raised the standards of objectivity in the governor's office.
You say that even though the voters apparently didn't buy it last fall.
Well, I don't think that the voters would dispute that. There are lots of other things that voters look at when they're making a selection. But I think that I leave office with the public perception that I've conducted the affairs of the governor's office honestly, fairly, to all people, including people that were not my constituents, politically. I've treated them fairly, and I'm very proud of that fact. And I think I leave that image as I leave office.
As you look ahead, maybe imagine Monday when you're sitting on that platform about to become a former governor of Louisiana. What do you imagine you might be thinking at that time?
My thoughts will be as to whether or not this ceremony will be over early enough for me to get to the golf course in Mandeville, Louisiana.
He brought
Absolutely. He had some tank cars pull up to LSU filled with buttermilk, and had an old-fashioned Mardi Gras, not Mardi Gras, Inauguration Day. I think that there have been a little ill will sometime. I think in Kinnon's inauguration, he and Earl Long did not ride in the car together in the parade, but maybe this is a tradition that's gone by the wayside. We've seen this in presidential races, but not necessarily in governor's races.
Well, you know, one of the hard things about planning inauguration is just exactly this, the weather. You have no idea what it's going to do. And of course, hours and weeks and months really of preparation went into this thing. You have a very elaborate grandstand here. You have seating for thousands and thousands of people. And up until 2 or 3 minutes ago, it was going to go one way or the other. And it's been that way all day long.
What we're going to do for you right now is we're going to see if we can go inside and just take a little look at the action that's going on in the House chamber. There is not yet the inauguration taking place, but there's a lot of activity, and we're going to go to that now and see if we can listen in on some of the activity.
I think is very true today. He said, we're told don't throw away our votes. And he said that's right. But he said, be sure you don't throw away your conscience either. So I'm proud to nominate Representative Jimmy Martin for the position of Speaker Pro Tem.
The chair now recognizes the Honorable Conway LeBlue from Cameron Parish.
Why is that picture so?
It's because it's dark in there. There aren't any lights in there.
Mr. Speaker and members of the House, it is a privilege and a pleasure to second the nomination of Representative Jimmy Martin of Welch for Speaker Pro Tem of the House. I have known Representative Martin for many years before he came here. He served, as Mr. Jenkins told you, as mayor of the city of Welch, and has been in the Louisiana House for 12 years. He was unopposed in the last election. He stands tall in his community. One thing that
Representative Conway LeBlue is talking at the mic in the House chambers. He is undoubtedly not dealing with inaugural activities right now, but they're talking about House activities and the election of a Speaker Pro Tem. I think what we'd like to do for you now, as we wait for some of the inaugural activities to commence, is to look at a story prepared by Robin Eckings earlier this week about the man who would be governor again. Edwin Edwards has served twice as governor. He's a man with a known record. He is a man who is very colorful and complex, and he is a man that we have both covered for a long time.
That's right. I think we both go back about 12 years with Edwin Edwards. He's been around a long time. And you know, one thing that's interesting, there has been, and it's been building a sort of crescendo over the weeks, a wave of enthusiasm about Edwin Edwards returning to the Capitol.
Indeed, but he returns facing a lot of problems, facing the impending need for a special session to raise taxes. I think that perhaps it would be good to get a little bit of a perspective on Edwin Edwards, and we're going to go now to a Tate story.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Governor of the State of Louisiana, the Honorable Edwin Edwards.
Thank you very much.
It's been 4 years since Edwin Edwards last served as governor of Louisiana. But even before he left office in March of 1980, there were signs that Edwards' stay away from the state's most powerful office could be temporary. For nearly half his life, Edwin Edwards has been running for or holding public office. The campaign trail has taken the 56-year-old Democrat a long way from his modest Avoyelles Parish home. From a seat on the Crowley City Council to the state Senate, to the U.S. Congress, and finally, the governor's office. In the summer of 1979, Governor Edwards neared the end of his second term, prevented by the state's constitution from seeking a third consecutive term. Publicly, his plans were to return to his private law practice. But in a farewell address to the legislature, there was a clear signal that Edwin Edwards had no intention of retreating from the spotlight.
For a quarter of a century, I've served the public.
During that time, my children and grandchildren were born, and I passed from a simple country lad to be twice honored as governor of this state. I now leave, not knowing whether or when, the mantle of public service to which I have become so accustomed may again settle on my shoulders. But I cannot forget the deep concern I have for my state and my country. And I assure you that wherever fate may take me and whatever role life may find for me, I will continue not as a public official, but as a public figure, to speak out on behalf of Louisiana and America.
Although the 8 years of the Edwards administration had been marked by controversies involving reported federal investigations, and the governor himself was called to federal court in New Orleans to testify in a case that resulted in a bribery conviction for his chief administrator, Edwin Edwards remained popular with the public. It wasn't long before the former governor returned his attention to the office he had just left. Each legislative session, it wasn't unusual to see Edwards seated in the House or Senate chamber, usually lobbying against a plan proposed by Governor Treen. During the 1982 legislative session, for example, he offered this warning to lawmakers considering a major oil and gas industry tax backed by the Treen administration.
You are going to have to run next year. And I assure you one of the issues in the campaign, yes, in your area, is going to be this particular effort to pass the largest tax ever sought to be passed on Louisiana consumers. I will not be able to avoid the issue, and I'm not going to try too hard. And it's going to spill over on you.
The eventual defeat of that tax plan, a key part of the administration's legislative package, was just one battle in a series of skirmishes that pitted the Republican incumbent against the former governor long before the official campaign for the 1983 governor's race began. The campaign itself was heated, with former Governor Edwards accusing Governor Treen of mismanaging state government, and Governor Treen accusing his main opponent of lying to get the voters on his side. But the October primaries brought a landslide victory for Edwards, who spent a record $13 million to win his office back. 5 months later, the governor-elect says he's eager to pick up where he left off 4 years ago.
Well, of course, I'm anxious for the swearing-in ceremonies, but more this time because I need the staff and the power and the prestige of the governor's office to get on about the job that's before us. The first time, of course, it was new and exciting and uncharted waters, so to speak. But now I know what I'm getting into, and I realize that the problems are far deeper and the solutions far more elusive than they were in 1972.
Governor-elect Edwards hasn't waited to take the oath of office to announce his first plans. 1 week from his inauguration, he is expected to call legislators to Baton Rouge for a tax-raising special session. On the campaign trail, Edwards promised to put more money in many areas, including education, jobs, and drainage. He also blamed the Treen administration for running the state budget into the red.
If we're having a trip down memory lane, some things have changed also, and that is times where easy money was out there. Maybe the severance tax, or there was more money in oil and gas. Is it harder to be governor now?
Well, I like to remind people that, yes, there was easy money because I had the vision in 1973 when no one else did and when I was being criticized for it, to know what to do and how to capitalize on those opportunities. We now have different problems and different opportunities. My own comments to you is that as difficult as this may appear to be, in fact, I think the solutions can be arrived at and that the job is not as odious as we thought at first, and because I have learned something in the last 3 months, and that is the willingness of people in Louisiana to face up to the responsibilities that lie before us.
Do you have to strike while the iron is hot, though? Do you have to come in with those the tax package and the entire package?
You have to do that because that's the political thing to do, but more important, time is of the essence. We just cannot wait any longer on cleaning up the environment, getting the educational system going, moving to stop the flooding that happens every 2 years, or to provide more jobs for people. Those needs, those problems, those haunting conditions are with us now and need to be resolved now.
So far, the estimates for the tax package legislators will be asked to consider ranges between $750 million and $1 billion. Some details of that plan may be revealed today as Edwin Edwards makes history in Louisiana, becoming the first man to win 3 terms as governor.
Okay, Governor, good luck in your next term in office.
I'll need it. Thank you.
Here we are back at a very wet inaugural day, March 12, 1984, the day that Edwin Edwards will begin serving his 3rd term as governor of Louisiana. And as you saw in that interview I did with him, he is optimistic, but he is also concerned about some difficult problems facing the state. And it is certainly symbolic, I think, Ken, that he has to go inside, either in the Senate or the House, to begin taking that oath of office to serve his term, because that's where he'll be going almost immediately to address the fiscal problems of the state.
I agree, Beth. You know, it's symbolic also in the sense with the stormy weather that there are some stormy days ahead for Louisiana as we try and straighten out the financial mess that we're in. We've heard figures of anywhere of a $500 million a year budget deficit, possibly as high as $600 million. Edwards, of course, is proposing a tax package that could generate up to $1 billion. And it's going to be no small task to get it accomplished, even for Edwin Edwards and the following that he's got in the legislature.
Certainly that is true. No one likes to vote for taxes, but Edwards seems convinced that if he brings an entire package showing how he will spend the money, that it will be spent on things like flood and drainage improvements and will be spent on teachers' pay increases and various needs addressed in the state, that the public will respond and that they will indeed pass a tax. We've had a number of different proposals out there, though nothing seems to be solid yet.
One thing I've noticed, too, about Edwards, since the election, he seems to be much more somber about the responsibilities that he faces ahead. I think he's taking it much more seriously than he ever has before, don't you?
He has said that you are going to see a different Edwin Edwards than the one you saw before in some ways, not in his actions perhaps, but sometimes in his demeanor. Although we haven't necessarily seen that thus far, he's been very flamboyant, paying off it was a record $13 million campaign debt, and he paid it off by a flamboyant trip to Paris.
He did, but he also lived up to several campaign promises by appointing women, and some very intelligent women, and minorities to high-ranking cabinet positions. And he also told those cabinet members to toe the line, that he was not going to expect them to either lobby or to use their influence to try and get things done for friends. And that's a refreshing change.
He did indeed do that. You know, on the campaign trail, he made some promises, and one of those that he did keep, as you mentioned, was his the appointments of women and minorities to important cabinet positions. Another thing that he did along the campaign trail was tell an awful lot of people that they could be involved in his inaugural parade, inaugural activities. Earlier today, before the heavens opened, we taped a little of the parade, showing some of the marvelous bands that are here in Louisiana.
They were really super.
We had, I think, bands representing almost every major university in the state. And we're going to go now to a little of that tape before we go into the legislature and see the activity.
The Tiger Band from Tigerland. An interesting note.
I can't believe it.
Was the first Tiger Band director. He was also the governor of the state of Louisiana.
We're back again with you.
Caught us by surprise.
Caught us by surprise.
But nothing today surprises me. It's been one of those days. It's been really unusual. Again, Beth, we had the parade earlier today where it did not rain. And once Mr. Edwards made his appearance on the podium and it looked like the activities were going to start, the skies opened up and it rained on the parade. Just as I said, I don't think it's going to rain anymore.
I know. I heard a little sort of a wistful tune singing, raindrops are falling on my head from one band member left. We are going to go inside. There has been some confusion as to whether the ceremonies will take place in the House chamber or in the Senate chamber. But as soon as we are totally familiar with everything that's going on, we will let you know. We assume, though, that it will be in the House chamber that Governor Edwards will be sworn in, because it is a larger chamber, and I guarantee it will be packed to overflowing.
It will be, and I think There really weren't very much in the way of contingency plans in case of rain. I really don't believe there was, Beth, because it's kind of confused inside right now what's going on. I think they had their fingers crossed all along that with this many people, with this kind of preparation, that not even Mother Nature would rain on Edwin Edwards, but it did.
Absolutely. You know, this inauguration was planned by one of Edwards' children, Anna Edwards, and one of our reporters saw her at the Mass earlier today, and she was a little upset because a lot of work has gone into planning this.
It really has.
I think it's interesting that Edwards' children have been taking a more important role in this administration.
They really have. Vicki, of course, and Steve and Anna, all of them have played a lot more visible role than they did last time. Of course, Vicki had a large part to do with this advertising campaign.
Indeed, and today, if we ever get to that point, which I think we will, his son Stephen will administer the oath of office in English, and his brother Marion, who was the campaign manager for Edwards' campaign, will administer the oath in French.
And that's kind of an interesting tradition that Edwards started back when he was first elected. Do you know of anyone else that had ever done that before?
No, I've never heard of that before. I imagine, well, early on we had some royal governors who only spoke French, so I assume they...
Well, this is the third time for Mr. Edwards, and not surprising, I don't imagine, to many people. Boy, the wind's whipping up now. Edwards has already sort of hinted that he's going to be around for a fourth term, too, or at least he's going to make a stab at it.
He is certainly looking in that direction. I think that today is an interesting day in that we were looking at the other statewide officials who will be taking their oath of office, and really the only new face among them is Superintendent of Education Tom Clausen.
That's right, Beth. In fact, a lot of the people that are going to be sworn in today didn't even have opposition. Secretary of State Jim Brown had no opposition. Attorney General Billy Gust had no opposition, and Shirley McNamara had no opposition. And the other people that were incumbents won rather handily. Sherman Bernard and Lieutenant Governor Bobby Freeman,
Yeah,
very handily.
Mary Evelyn Parker, who's been there for a long time, and as the papers blow out here, as we sit in front of the Capitol that Huey Long built, which is still the tallest Capitol in the United States, we're going to go inside where we hope some of our cameramen and reporters are dry and see what is going on in the House chambers.
And possibly down around the House floor. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize to you for the inconvenience in the House chamber. Our facilities are only so large. There's nothing that we can do, and it is beyond our control. But we certainly ask for your cooperation at this time so that we might move into that. I might also mention on the Appropriations Committee that I'm going to appoint Kevin Rowley as chairman and Representative Eddie Doucette as vice chairman. Mr. Patty.
Mr. Speaker, members, I now move that the House of Representatives stand adjourned.
Without objection, so ordered.
I think that, as you can tell from this, that the House has taken care of some of its duties in terms of establishing and setting up its rules and its leadership, and it's now adjourned.
House cleaning right now. It is adjourned. We understand that Governor Edwards will be sworn in the House. We don't know when. By Constitution, it's a very strict time limit that they are supposed to follow, but I don't know if the Constitution allows for bad weather.
Well, that's right. The Constitution says at noon. And so wherever he is going to do it, I will presume that he will raise his hand and be dutifully sworn in.
With the crowd they have out there, he may be in the lobby at noon. He may have to be sworn in the lobby.
I think that tonight, where they will have a gala inaugural ball at the Superdome, they are probably very happy that it will be inside someplace with a roof.
That's right. I think it begins at about 8:30, and they are expecting a packed house,
I think something like 200,000 invitations were sent out, and if everyone shows up, they're going to have a bit of a problem.
Well, we were going, but after this, I think I may go home and go to bed tonight. It is a little chilly out here. It is stopped raining, but the wind's picked up a little bit. Governor Edwards and all the other state officials, as we have said, are inside the Capitol right now, ready to be sworn in, and we are going to be having live coverage of that. We have our fingers crossed, barring any problems. It's, as we said before, Beth, it's just a tremendous undertaking to try and get this thing on the air to begin with when it's outside. And then when you have to change all your plans on the spur of the moment, there is naturally a lot of confusion.
Indeed it is. We were talking earlier about some of the activities that will be taking place today, no matter what the location, and about the other statewide officials that are going to be sworn in. You know, Lieutenant Governor Bobby Freeman will be taking the oath of office again. He was surrounded sort of by a sea of Republicans last time out. He had a very brief inaugural address. This will be his second term in office. And hopefully this time, for Bobby Freeman, he will have a more receptive governor to work with.
I think he will. Governor Edwards has already made it clear that Bobby Freeman's going to play a very active role in his administration. And I think with the ambitious undertakings that Edwards has planned, he's going to need a strong right arm. He already has appointed Bobby Freeman to oversee the World's Fair, and that in itself is going to be a major task, because at stake is not only the millions and maybe even billions of dollars it brings to Louisiana, but it's also the image of Louisiana, because let's face it, if it's a bad World Fair, it will be a bad reflection on the state of Louisiana.
Probably so, and that's interesting because there are some things that carry over from one administration to the next. The World's Fair has been worked on for a long time, and Dave Treen can claim some credit for certainly getting backing and involvement, and we've finally had a push from a lot of the Democratic congressional delegation. Russell Long was very instrumental in getting a number of countries to sign up at the last moment. And so Edwin Edwards will be serving as governor as the world comes to Louisiana. And I think that this is indicative of perhaps on several occasions when you don't have this extreme strain between administrations. Everyone wants to see that go well.
That's certainly true. And of course you also have another strong leader right behind him in Stephanie Alexander, who will be the new Commissioner of Administration. And we both have known Stephanie for a long time. She is a very intelligent, capable person, and it's going to be interesting to see how she functions. I know she'll work well with Edwin Edwards, but let's face it, she may still have a little problem working with some legislators until she can get in there and show them what she can do.
Do I detect a trace of male chauvinism?
Not on my part,
no,
but we do know that exists
Indeed.
in some quarters.
The interesting thing is that Edwards has put so much responsibility in a young woman. Certainly his last Commissioner of Administration, Charles Romer, is now serving time in a federal prison for involvement in campaign fundraising for another election. It is a very difficult job to serve as really the person that has to work with the day-to-day goings-on of government. And this young woman, Stephanie Alexander, will have a great responsibility on her shoulders, but she says that she's anxious to undertake the task, and Edwin Edwards says he has confidence in her. He also has a number of other interesting appointments in his cabinet, and we will see them probably packed in the corners of the House chamber. We have Dr. Sandra Robinson, a black woman doctor
from New
Orleans, who will serve as Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Resources.
I think one of the most controversial, though, departments right now will be the Department of Corrections with C. Paul Phelps. Of course, C. Paul Phelps served in that capacity under Edwards before. He did it very capably, but at times controversially. And, of course, that is a department right now that has problems.
Certainly does, and as someone was wont to say, Earl Long, I have heard, there ain't no votes in Angola, and in that case it is very difficult to spend such huge sums of money on prisons, but I think that there is indeed a need to address the problem of corrections, and that's going to be a tough one in the years
It really
ahead.
is. In fact, the Budget Committee has already wrestled or tried to begin wrestling with that problem. When Governor Treen ordered across-the-board cuts in budgets, the Corrections Department came in with one that would force them to close prisons, lay off guards, and the Budget Committee, ironically, facing a deficit, told them, get serious, bring us back a budget that's realistic, in fact, a higher budget. So at a time when we're talking about cutting the budget, the legislators are saying come back in and ask for more money that reflects the real needs of your department.
But if we're talking about a difficult area, I would think dealing with the environment is one thing that Edwin Edwards is going to have to address in this third term in office. That is an area that he has said he needs some improving.
He admits it, he really does.
He admits that perhaps he didn't address it as seriously in his previous administration, and we, as yet, do not know his plans for a creation of a new Department of the Environment. There was a department established and a secretary appointed by Dave Treen, and he only served about a month and a half, and we as yet do not know what Edwards plans to do with that specific department. He doesn't like the way they merged two departments to create this new department.
One thing also, Beth, he's keeping a tight lip about what he plans to do about state finances. He has said that he's going to have a financial package ready, a tax package ready for the legislature when they begin their special session, or he makes the call for the special session next week. But he's being very hush-hush and playing his cards very close to his vest about what he's going to do.
I hear from our people inside the House that we have a shot of current Governor Dave Treen in the House chambers. We might go to that. Ah, there he is with his wife, Dodie. You know that Dave Treen, for much of his administration, saw Edwin Edwards sitting on the sideline. He was really always there, don't you think? Someone said that some people never really thought that Treen was governor because they still had an allegiance to Edwin Edwards.
I think that's true, Beth. I think Dave Treen served 4 years in Baton Rouge in the shadow of Edwin Edwards. Of course, right now you see a number of state officials up there. Tom Clausen was up there congratulating Governor Treen and wishing him well. Jerry Fowler, number of people. There's Tom Clausen. And of course, it's a sobering moment also because Dave Treen was a likable guy. He really was. We've known him for a long time, and he's just one of the most likable and honest men you'll ever know in your life.
He seems to be very content with himself. As we said earlier, he's going to go to a home he's building in Beauchene in St. Tammany Parish, and he says he's going to try and play golf at least twice a week. But I would suspect that we are going to see Dave Treen around some, because he is certainly not somebody who quits anything easily. He ran many times before he ever secured the governor's position, and I would imagine he has said that he is going to have a role in Ronald Reagan's bid for re-election to the presidency.
I believe that he will, Beth, in some form. I think one of the things that still remains to be seen is what, if anything, this does to the Republican Party in Louisiana. Of course, 4 years ago, the Republicans were on the bandwagon saying it was the revitalization, the rebirth of the Republican Party in Louisiana. And if that is true, then does this signal the reverse? I don't think so, but we will have to see, because, of course, Ronald Reagan needs to carry Louisiana among those states. He carried it 4 years ago. He needs to carry it again this year.
Indeed, he does, and we're going to have lots of politics in Louisiana. It seems as soon as one race is finished, another one begins. I think that if we have flamboyant and colorful elections, it's because it's a tradition in Louisiana. And while we have the rain pouring around us, we're going to take you back briefly to a happier time, a time when the sun was shining, but oh so briefly on this inaugural day, and see some of the young people and some that participated in the parade earlier today.
Including Mrs. Edwards has one on, and daughter Vicky. But I got a feeling it's going to hold out through the rest of the proceedings, Beth. It looks that way anyway.
Certainly we'll be optimistic.
They're known as the Longhorn Band. Their membership is 67.
And bands have come here from all over the state of Louisiana to take part in this historic occasion.
Is Joan Hess. They're representing Avoyelles Parish.
Band here from Avoyelles Parish.
Ray Johnson, Brian Fisher, and Ray Weldon. They have 160 members.
Tell you what, take that. Take this right here.
Where's
plug it on
Bobby?
that, and we use the feed in between.
Who knows?
Last I saw
Okay,
it was on
so
the shotgun like this.
Take the shotgun out for a second, please.
Probably.
Yes, that's correct. Right on the field. Now let's shut down there.
Hey, Paula, I'll keep this receiver on.
Ms. Mary Ellen Parker, State Treasurer. She is serving her 5th term as State Treasurer. She has previously served as Commissioner John G. Clausen, Superintendent of Education. He is beginning his first term as superintendent. He is from Centerville.
Well, Beth, there's Superintendent-elect Tom Clausen, soon to be Superintendent Tom Clausen, with his family. Clausen, of course, shocked a lot of people when he beat incumbent Kelly Nix.
That certainly was the big upset of the fall elections, and Clausen has had a difficult time. He has had a multiple bypass heart surgery after having a heart attack following his election.
Not only that, Beth, there have been questions raised about some campaign contributions made, not during this past election, but 4 years ago, and that has kind of clouded his swearing in. He insists that he will go ahead and serve, that there won't be any problems. But of course, that cloud of a grand jury investigation, a federal grand jury in New Orleans, certainly hangs over right now.
And certainly education is one area in which a lot of needs to be addressed right away. The Board of Elementary and Secondary Education has decided they're going to have stiffer requirements for graduation, and there has been some position put forth by both Clausen and Governor-elect Edwin Edwards that perhaps they need to modify that position. So I would imagine that there's going to be a good deal of talk back and forth between Edwards and Clausen.
Well, Edwards has already said, Beth, that he doesn't like what the Bessie Board did. He thought maybe they went too far. And he's talking about going to the legislature to make changes if he cannot convince the Bessie Board to roll back the changes themselves.
Indeed, that's true, and I think Edwards has indicated that he's concerned about education in Louisiana to the point that he's going to look for money for a pay raise for teachers, and that's something that always makes you popular.
Certainly does, Beth.
We see a lot of young people here today in this parade that went past earlier. There were bands from all over the state. From Southern University to Grambling University to Spring Hill High School.
Well, I think the nice thing, if there can be a nice thing on a day like this, at least the kids did get a chance to march. There was talk when Edwards was at Mass this morning that possibly the parade would have to be canceled. The skies did clear for a little while, allowing the parade to roll, and it was nice. It was good that the kids were able to parade. In fact, they marched right in front of the steps of the Capitol, as you see here. Governor Edwards was there waving them. His wife Elaine was there waving at them. Of course, Vicky and Steve, his daughter and son, and Anna there. They were all waving, and it was a big thrill for the kids. You could tell it was.
Indeed it was, and they had a uniquely Louisiana touch to this parade because they were throwing doubloons. Sherman Bernard emptied an entire bag full of balloons.
For a while, I thought Sherman was going to throw his shoes, too.
He certainly was enthusiastic, and it is indeed a day for bands, and it is a day for thunder, though, and rain, but it's a day that certainly hasn't dampened the spirit of a number of people that are here. We're going to go back shortly to live action in the House chambers, where we understand they're preparing to begin the inaugural festivities. There is indeed an overflow of people here today. A number of people come to witness the swearing in of new representatives and senators, or old representatives and senators for that matter, filling the House chambers.
That's right, Beth. And of course, there's one of the elected officials who will be sworn in soon, Commissioner of Agriculture Bob Odom, who won very easily last time. Odom has gained quite a following across the state. He, of course, is a career ag man, so to speak. There he is, getting out of the car with his wife and getting ready to go up the steps of the Capitol to be sworn in. Had an umbrella, doesn't need it now. We could use it, but he doesn't need it. He's inside the Capitol at the moment. That is Commissioner of Agriculture Bob Odom. And of course, you know, getting back to Sherman Bernard, Beth, he has to be one of the last of the old-time politicians, don't you think?
Probably so.
Cut out of the old mold of Earl Long.
I think one of the interesting things is that there are so many incumbents that are back with us. There are a number of people in the legislature that have been there before, and today is indeed a day for them, although I would say that there is a changeover somewhat in both the leadership of the House and the Senate.
I think that's where you'll notice your biggest changes. The Senate insisting, of course, that they are going to be much more independent than they were 4 years ago when Edwin Edwards left office. office, and certainly much more than they were 8 or 12 years ago when Edwards first came to Baton Rouge.
Although I would suggest to you that both the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House have been handpicked by Edwin Edwards. In one case, Senator Sammy Nunez will be President of the Senate, and in the other, Representative John Alario is Speaker of the House. It was interesting that Representative John Hankel was the choice of Dave Treen. And although he worked very hard to establish the independency of the House, when it comes right down to it, I suppose if you garner 62% of the votes, the politicians in Louisiana are pretty practical, and they're going to go with you.
I think that was the first real test of Edwin Edwards' strength, even before he was sworn in, Beth. The fact that Hankel, who had done a pretty good job and said he wanted to keep the job and claimed he had enough support to keep the job, was not able to muster anywhere near enough support to keep the job.
That's absolutely right. And the interesting thing, I think, is that Edwards is going to have his strength tested very quickly in that special session will be called, as I understand. Of course, he can't officially call one until he is governor, but odds are at the Capitol today that, as we said earlier, there will be a special session beginning March the 19th, and in that session he must address the fiscal problems of the state. Edwards told me earlier that it was sort of like telling your bride that you were going to take her hunting on your honeymoon. He said the honeymoon may be the time for him to get through the things that he wants to get through, in this case taxes.
I think he's very realistic about it, that if he wants to get it done, he better get it done while he's on a roll. And right now, with 62% or more of the vote that he garnered last time and 1 million plus voters behind him, he has the support now to get it done. And obviously, too, Beth, from a political standpoint, the closer you get to the next election, the harder it is to pass a tax package. And the kind of tax package that he's talking about, upwards to maybe $1 billion, that's going to be tough to swallow for a lot of legislators, even EWE supporters.
Probably so. And at this moment, why don't we go into the House chamber to see what's taking place there now? Could you plug this in? Pull this out.
Oh, okay. The guy is here to sign the Marion is doing the thing. Second. Be a little backwards, but you all work across the board. You set him up so we can get the cameras for a good shot when y'all swear. All right. We'll kind of look that way if we can. Would you rather he'd be here and you're back? That's okay. Stephen will stand here and I'll stand here. Maybe even more forward. You'd rather him more this way? And then Stephen here, me here. Or would you rather block the camera? But you see, we'll block the more if we try that too much, we'll block the camera.
We have seen Edwin Edwards and Elaine Edwards as they are in the House chamber, and we have reporter Robin Eckings there in the House chamber, and we're going to go to Robin to see if she can give us an update on exactly what is happening. Robin?
Well, certainly is rather hectic here in the House. Last I heard, Beth and Ken, is that we were looking for the Attorney General before we could get the official swearing-in ceremonies underway. Attorney General William Gust, who was himself sworn in today for another term. Everybody is pretty well waiting, kind of shaking hands, getting acquainted. A lot of new members here. You can see the House chamber is quite full, and we have many people outside in the chamber who are waiting to get in to see the swearing-in ceremonies. The governor will have to be sworn in, of course, right around noon. That is required. That is why we have had to wait. And everybody right now looking, waiting, and for Edwin Edwards to take his third term as governor of Louisiana. It's been a very difficult day and a lot of confusion. We did have the election of the House and Senate leadership, as Beth talked about earlier, and the pro tem position in the House Baton Rouge Representative Joe Delpit. That election fairly easy. There was some dispute over in the Senate over the pro temp's position over there. All in all, things are, considering the circumstances and considering the weather, we hear the action, and I go back to you, Beth and Ken.
Well, Robin, thank you. I'm glad that you're inside and keeping us up and in touch with what's going on.
She looks like it's a little crowded in there, but I think I'd take being crowded over being cold at this point.
Although we are fortunate that we aren't wet.
I'm telling you, the boys did a good job. At least we do have a little roof over our head.
I understand that they are about to start the ceremonies there at in the House chambers, and we're going to go to them to see if Representative Joe Delpit is indeed going to function as the Master of Ceremonies.
Democratic society, the inauguration of a freely elected leader who will, for the next 4 years, shoulder the hopes, the aspirations, and the burdens of the people of this state. To begin these ceremonies, will you please rise and join Mr. Louis Askins of Plaquemine in the singing of the National Anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched was so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave, the brave, the brave, the brave.
We have just heard Louis Askins sing the National Anthem. This is unique because he has sung this twice. We heard him sing it once out here on the steps of the Capitol, and he is now singing it again inside, signifying the beginning of the inaugural activities.
And a new era, possibly, in Louisiana.
Possibly so, and I think that we are going to have the program going on as scheduled, and we'll be back to join you again with the inauguration of Edwards in just a moment.
Rather ominous looking.